If you don't know me yet, I'm Kat from the Wild Alaskan Company recipe team. Today, I'm going to introduce you to what I think is an absolutely essential fish recipe. It doesn't really matter what species we're talking about here, fish piccata. It's a meal that requires very few ingredients. I love to do this event every now and then because pretty much no chopping. All the ingredients I need are right here. Caper, a tropical lemon, or actually this is a lime, even though it's orange. It's very confusing when you're in a different place. Got a tropical citrus fruit, butter. I have some high heat cooking oil. Actually, it's ghee, so a derivative of butter, and salt, pepper, fish. That's pretty much it. I'm going to be making this today with coho salmon. Like I said, you can use any fish you like. Whitefish, Pacific halibut, lingcod, even rockfish, I think would be a really great option for this. Any type of salmon you like as well. I haven't tried fish piccata with sablefish. That's probably the only one, the only version I have not made. So anyway, fish piccata, essential recipe for home cooks. It feels kind of fancy, even though it's so easy. So that's another reason I really like it. It's like a grown-up meal. So we are going to get started with piccata. But before we do that, what is piccata? Generally, it's a cut of protein that's paired with a lemony, buttery sauce. Oftentimes, it's punctuated with a handful of capers. There's typically a splash of something like broth or wine in there too, so it feels really nice and saucy. I would say that in the US, you might more oftentimes see something like a chicken piccata. If any of you watch what's the show? The Bear. They had a really great chicken piccata episode in season one. So that's a really like classic way that I had seen it before, making it myself with fish. In Italy, though, where piccata has its roots, a hearty fish like swordfish is more typical than something like a land-based protein. So that being said, we're gonna go Alaska for this piccata and we're using coho. I have my stainless steel skillet. If you're new to searing fish, this piccata method, you don't have to be completely perfect and precise, but because we're gonna be dredging the fish in a little bit of flour, so that makes it a little easier to sear. Great if you're a beginner. If you're just an expert and enjoy cooking fish anyway, then that's good too. But I like using a stainless steel skillet for pretty much any type of cooking I do. It sears better than most nonstick skillets that I've used in the past. I know they have new innovations on nonstick technology, but I'm a little old school and stubborn, so I'm gonna go with the most difficult possible thing to sear on stainless steel. And I say that kind of half jokingly because it's actually very easy once you have the technique right. For this one, and like I said, we're going to preheat this to medium high heat. I might lower it to medium here in just a minute. In the meantime, we've got some coho salmon. Coho is a little bit softer than something like sockeye, so you might oftentimes see something like a crack in it or little breaks, and that is completely normal. It is very delicate type of salmon, delicate in flavor and delicate in texture. So once this cooks up, it's going to be nice and firm and flaky. So I'm just coating it right now in what's actually a gluten-free flour. I'm using a plantain flour just because that's what I have here while I'm away from home. Regular flour is, a more typical choice, but anything where you can get a light dusting that's a gluten-free or regular wheat-based option is what we're looking for to get started. This is going to help the fish develop a little bit of a crust as it sears, and also it's going to help thicken the piccata sauce that we are building. So I have this dusted in some plantain flour. I'm going to season it with a little bit of salt and pepper. Always like fresh ground pepper here. All right, so that looks like it's pretty much good to go. The plantain flour is a little bit of it's not white, it's like a little bit gray, so it almost looks like a whole wheat flour. Now, let's get some fat going in this skillet. I really like using ghee because it has a very high smoke point. If you don't mind using, actually, it's funny, this is a dairy-based product, but it is lactose-free because butter, the milk solids in butter are what burn. The fat itself is not what causes butter to brown and burn. It's just the actual milk solids itself. So ghee is just what's left in the butter. Once all of those milk solids have been removed, you can actually make ghee or clarified butter, it's same thing, on your own if you have the time, but you could also buy it, which is what I typically do. So by far my favorite fat to sear with. You can use other options like avocado oil. I used to use grapeseed and canola oil, but sort of have switched off of that. And just have a little bit in the pan, just enough to cover the bottom for some nice coverage on the fish itself. So next essential thing you need is a fish spatula, but let's go ahead and get this fish into the pan. So if you're using something that's skin on, I like to start with the skin down. And you should see this immediate bubbling around the edges here and hear a nice enthusiastic sizzle. That way, you know, the pan is hot enough. If you're not hearing or seeing that sizzling, you either need to wait for the pan to preheat a little bit more or turn up the dial so that you do have a nice healthy bubbling around the edges. So this looks good to me right now. I'm gonna let this cook just for a few minutes to maybe develop a little bit of a nice crust on the bottom and get some of that fish cooked partway through. So I do like to turn this down to medium because flour can burn. So start a little bit higher and then just lower the temperature if you see things are getting too dark too soon. If you prefer to not use any flour at all, whether you're doing a gluten-free version or just like a regular wheat version, you could actually probably skip it. What you're going to be left with is something that's a little less saucy, but you'll have all of those flavors and ingredients in there. So, you know, if for some reason you open up your cabinet and you realize, I don't have any flour, I don't have any obscure plantain flour or regular all-purpose flour, feel free to skip it, and then you'll just be searing the fish without anything on it, just some salt and pepper, and then building the sauce from there. It'll be a little thinner in consistency, but it's still going to taste just as good. So no reason to not make a piccata dish here. Getting this going. The other ingredient, oh, I forgot to mention, so this is usually made with a stock, broth, or wine. I have actually some fish stock that I made from fish that a friend caught. So that is what I'm using as the liquid in this dish. The stock is what is going to help add even like more flavor and moisture to the actual sauce itself. But I've used things like just even water flavored with a little bit of soy sauce, which kind of tastes a little brothy, like a soy broth. I've used veggie stock. I've used something like white wine or rosé, anything to give it a little more dimension. So either flavor or acidity. Those are the two different things that you're getting depending on whether you're using stock or whether you're using something like wine. This looks like it's ready to flip because I see we're getting a little opaque on that thinner end of the fillet here. And that looks nice and crisp. The flour solids are getting a little brown here on the side. It's not a problem. I'm just going to scoop a little bit of that out, but that's pretty much to be expected. And that's going to give the sauce some color once it starts coming together. So what we're doing on this second side is just cooking the fish through until it's almost easy enough to flake with a fork. A little bit on the rare side is totally fine because I like to add the fish back into the pan once they're soft there to kind of get it coated. We'll just let this cook for another minute or two. In the meantime, this side is like nice and flat, which is what is going to give us a little bit of a crisp later once we bring this piccata together. So if you have any flour left over, you can just toss that or stash it in the fridge for a fish tomorrow. I don't like throwing flour away, so, you know, I'm a little crazy like that, but I'll use it for something like maybe a fish pancake, or trying to think of what else I've done with extra flour in the past. Yeah, just another round of dredging. It should be still good to use for the next day or two. So this looks like it's actually pretty good. I'm gonna grab a serving plate here, or just to temporarily put this on the side. Yum. So the flour helps the fish come off of the pan super, super easily. If you're not using flour, you just need to have a little bit more precise technique with this. You want to make sure the fish has been patted dry because any moisture that's left on the fish is going to cause it to steam. You're not going to get a crisp, and it's more likely to stick to the pan if that's the case. So next thing we want to do is add in some of that fish stock or wine, what have you. And you want to be careful when you do that. As you can see, that bubbles up once it hits the hot pan. So anytime you're adding liquid to residual fat in a pan, you either want to drain a little bit of the fat off if there's a lot in there. This was a decent amount. And then you want to make sure you're pouring it away from you. So that's why I sort of lifted the pan away from the heat. In case there was any splattering, it was going in that direction toward the backsplash of the oven rather than onto me. So I'm gonna let this get a little bit thickened. Grab a spoon here. It already is picking up a little bit of body from whatever flour bits are left in the pan. So that's what I'm looking for. And then to this, let me go ahead and add capers. If you have something like parsley, that's a really great addition to this as well. Chives, I think, would be really good. Dill would be an excellent choice as well. Anything to give the sauce like a little freshness, totally optional and customizable depending on what you have in your garden or in your fridge right now. I had nothing. I had mint, which I thought would not be a good a good mix for this. So I'm holding off on the herbs today. Let me just get this simmering again. You always kind of want to control the heat so that you get a nice bubble when you're making a sauce. Nothing boiling, but you do want to see some evaporation happening. So let me mix up just a little bit. That looks pretty good. To this, pretty much all we're missing right now is some butter and citrus. So this is my tropical lemon. And I'm just going to add this to the pan. This is going to give a little bit of balance to the richness of the sauce and a little brightness. I go ahead and add my butter. Butter is going to go in at the end, and I'm going to turn off the heat. If I need to turn it back on, I will, but we're not looking to cook the butter. We're just looking to melt it into the pan and create a really nice, rich, glossy sheen in the sauce. It'll help some of those components come together, looking so good and spoonable right now. And just to note, this isn't one of those sauces that sticks to the back of a spoon. It's more of like a drizzly, spoonable, slurpable sauce. So it's great if you have a little piece of toast on the side. Even if you wanted to serve this over rice, I think that would be a really good option as well. So, and then back into this, I'm gonna put my fish skin side up and just bring this together. I know my fish was a little on the rare side, so I'm just turning the pan back on here for a minute. I like to serve my fish skin side up so that the skin stays a little crisper. If I were to flip it over into the pan, totally edible and delicious, but the skin will just pick up some of that moisture and become, you know, less of a crisp and more of a, what you think salmon skin is supposed to be like. So this looks so good. And as you can see, the bubbles are getting a little bit bigger, so that sauce is nice and thick now. Thick but spoonable. Not thick enough to coat the back of a spoon, but you can see there's a line that gets drawn through it when I drag my spoon through. So that's kind of the consistency we're looking for here. I'm going to transfer this to my serving plate here. Kind of blackened looking fish, but I promise it's not burnt. And then let's just pour this all around the fish. We'll put a little. We have fresh ground pepper, and that's pretty much it. Let's take a bite of this for progeny's sake. Perfectly flaky. It came off really easily with the fork. You know, if you're not sure if the fish is done or not yet, checking on the flakiness with the fork is pretty much like my surefire way, especially when we're doing such a quick cooking method here. It's kind of a little tricky to measure the temperature and doneness of a fish with a thermometer when you're doing something on the stove top that just takes minutes per side. So I like to do the fork test. So let's take a bite. Delicious as always. Congratulations, me. We're going to close out, but next week we are air frying salmon from frozen. I'm going to show you how to make a really easy teriyaki sauce with not all homemade ingredients, but it's a homemade teriyaki sauce. Way easier than going to the store, and I love that on salmon. So I hope you're able to join me, and until then, live wild. Bye, everyone.